Hi and welcome. In this video I will be showing you how to paint a dual tone watercolor hydrangea from wet on wet to wet on dry and various more watercolor techniques. So hello there and welcome to Run My Arts watercolor painting series, and in this tutorial I'll be using this particular hydrangea, which was originally of violet and bluish tone, as you can see here from the picture, but since we are moving towards autumn season, the color has however changed due to the temperature influence. So the entire hydrangea flower has transformed into a different color, which is of red and light green. And I thought, okay, since we don't see much of a hydrangea painting in these two tones, I thought this would be a good opportunity to use these two colors instead. To kickstart, I am going to use one of these art sponges. These are actually very friendly on to be used on watercolor papers, and they have textures on them. You can use it for watercolor as well as acrylic, I think. And I'm going to go with the middle one since it has less textures, because I'm not going to focus too much on the texture creation. It's just a technique. And the paper that I will be using for this painting is Canson XL cold press watercolor paper, 300 grams per square meter, and it's of half the size of this watercolor paper, which is approximately A5 size, and the orientation is going to be landscape. So just to show you a quick view of how I decided the color palette for this hydrangea painting based on my color swatch or color charting scrapbook that I've done ages ago. So the first color is going to be this permanent carmine, and the second color is going to be of a light green shade, and I have posted this color chart on my Pinterest account as well as my blog. So if you're interested to download them, so check out the link in the description. It's totally free in case it could be helpful to some of you. So looking at the chart, is not a ready-made color that I had to mix brilliant green with a little bit of Indian yellow to arrive at this nice cool green. So I've made variety of color mixes. So if you're interested, as I said, you can download them from my Pinterest account as well as my blog. So just to show you here how I mix my the light green shade, as I said earlier, it is the brilliant green, and please note that the brilliant green is under Schminker Academy series, and a little bit of Indian yellow. So mix these two colors until you arrive at a very cool green shade. And just testing out the shade onto a clean paper. So it should look something light in shade like this. If you want it to be even lighter, then just increase the amount of Indian yellow in it. And the second color is permanent carmine. There's no mixtures in it, and if you don't have permanent carmine, then go with the shade similar to this shade, which is crimson. So I have taped down the paper, and I've also pre-sketched just a basic shape of the hydrangea, nothing in detail. You can just sketch a nice uneven shape of the hydrangea. And I'm going to kickstart this painting with a wet on wet technique. So I'm going to use my larger size mop brush to pre-wet the sketch area, which is the Hydrangea Sketch. As you can see here, generously pre-wet the sketch with some clean water. You want this to be totally wet. If you notice the paper drying up quickly, just keep re-wetting the sketch area until it maintains that shine or shimmer on the sketch. Next, I am going to make the first layer of painting by using this sponge that I showed earlier. So I have to pre-wet the sponge so that it's soft and easier to use it with paint. So make sure you wet your sponge and squeeze the excess water from it. Next, I am going to dip the sponge onto the first color, which is the cool green, and then quickly dab it onto the pre-wet surface of the sketch. As you can see here, I'm getting some nice smooth wash of the cool green shade because the surface of the paper is already pre-wet. And I'm using the opposite side of the sponge to dip into the second color, also by pre-wetting the sponge and squeezing out excess water. So if you do it with a dry sponge, you will end up with hard lines or hard marks which you will have to adjust using a watercolor brush to smoothen it. So you don't want that to happen. Since this is the first layer of painting, you don't want to focus on marks and textures on your painting. So make sure your sponge is wet to get this soft look. So once the first layer of paint has completely dried, I have made a sketch of a few hydrangea flower petals, just a few, which I foresee maintaining it in a very light shade. So you don't have to fully sketch your the hydrangea petals, just a few would do. This would be our highlights of the entire hydrangea painting, and you will see the outcome as I start painting more. So kick-starting with the permanent carmine once again, since this is going to be the major color of this entire hydrangea. So I'm making a medium consistency of paint mix, and since I mentioned earlier that I need to maintain a few petals as the highlights, so the only way to go about this is by applying the negative painting technique. So in negative painting, we will be painting the surroundings of the actual subject matter, and in this case is the light colored petals. So I am painting the surroundings of these light colored petals, avoiding the main petals that I have drawn earlier. As I said, I need to maintain it in a brighter shade or as the highlights of the entire hydrangea. So by painting the surroundings with a darker shade or second layer painting, the lighter petal remains bright, and this is the objective of negative painting, whereby you paint the surroundings or the background of the subject matter in a darker shade so that the subject matter appears brighter or light in color. And as for some part of the petals, you will notice me just dropping in a few dots of paint and then giving them some light washes with a clean damp brush, because I don't want the color to appear too bright. So you will notice me applying a few different techniques like this while I paint in this entire painting tutorial, since this is not a very smooth looking flower. As you know, a hydrangea consists of many petals where their colors vary from one to another. So as I go along the process, I will be randomly applying the various techniques as I see suitable based on my observation of the actual hydrangea flower, which I am using as a reference, or it can be also from a reference photo. So I hope you could follow the entire painting process, and I'll try my best to explain some of the crucial areas of the painting. Now I need to differentiate between darker shades and lighter shades on this hydrangea painting. So I've added in a little bit of sapphire, or you can also use a burnt umber into your carmine mix to achieve a darker or deep red mix, and just dropping in some of that deep red shade into parts that I foresee to have a darker shade of the hydrangea petals, especially the ones at the bottom of the flower. So I am just going to continue painting a few petals using this deep red. So some petals will be painted completely with this paint mix, and others, as I mentioned earlier, would be just a hint of those colors where I just apply some dots and give them some light washes with a clean damp brush. So it will be a very much repetitive process, and whichever area of the hydrangea flower that I find suitable to apply these techniques. And also not to forget the negative painting techniques onto the sketched petal that I did much earlier in the painting process. So basically the color palette revolves around this carmine shade. The only difference is in its tonal value, whereby I use a darker shade by mixing in sapphire if I would like to paint it in a darker tone, and fall back to the original carmine color when I need it to look much brighter. Alright, done with the red shade. Now it's time to add in the light green shade. And the painting technique falls back to the same method that I used for the red paint, which is the negative painting technique as well as focusing on tonal values. And to add some vibrancy onto the green petals, I have introduced a little bit of that carmine just to add some interesting contrast. And also dropping in the same red as a dot onto other petals as well. And once again I am back with the original permanent carmine mix to add more vibrancy to this entire painting. As I said, I am trying to focus on the tonal values and creating some contrast here and there so it looks more realistic. And painting towards the corners of the hydrangea, I am trying to use the tip of my brush to create some pointy looking petal, as I don't want it to look too much like a ball or a sphere. I want it to have more realistic look, though at this point of time it already looks like a sphere, but you can see this as a aerial view of a hydrangea flower. And once applied the paint, quickly I am using my clean damp brush to give it some light washes here and there where I foresee requires some smooth look. So at this point of time you may also lift out some pigment with the same clean damp brush if you think there's too much paint. So here's a close-up view of how I lift out some pigment to create highlights as well as softening the look of some part of the flower painting. So I am going to leave the hydrangea painting to dry and focus on painting the background. And in order to do this, I'm going to use the wet on wet technique once again. So you can see me pre-wetting the background area or the white area of the paper using my mop brush. And as you pre-wet the areas around the hydrangea painting, do not worry if the painting starts to bleed. This actually adds more character to the entire painting as a natural look. And once again, I am going to use the sponge technique to paint the background using the same color palette. So just dab in the sponge with both the red and a green shade according to your own preference. I would say a nice balanced mix of both the colors would do justice to your painting. You can keep adding in the sponging technique to create an impression of other hydrangea heads in the background. So keep adding them until you achieve a similar look, more like a bokeh effect. And once you're happy with the look of it, just leave the entire painting to completely dry. So this is the outcome once the entire painting is dry. So if you're happy with this look, then you can stop the painting process, but I would like to move further by adding in more fine-tuned details. In order to paint the fine details, I am using a smaller size round brush which has fine tip, which is of size 2 from Da Vinci. Starting off with the light green mix to paint the fine details. So I am just trying to apply the light green shade in the gaps that I notice between the flower petals, the hydrangea petals. And by now I think you would have noticed that few bright looking petals adds value to this entire hydrangea as a result of the negative painting that I applied earlier. So I am just trying to enhance the outcome of this negative painting technique by using a smaller tip brush to paint in between those smaller gaps, and also applying a little bit of paint towards the corner of the hydrangea head, and I am using the clean damp brush to smoothen the look of the paint that I applied. So basically it's just a repeat process of applying paint and washes wherever I foresee necessary to enhance the look of this entire hydrangea. Repeating the same technique using carmine shade this time. So I am extending the same painting technique onto the background as well, where I wish to highlight a few hydrangea petals onto other hydrangea heads, just to create some vibrancy in the entire painting. Alright, time to fine tune the details of the light petals as well as other petals by adding in some patterns as in dots and fine lines. So if you're not a fan of these fine details, then you can leave the painting as it is. I just like to go an extra mile by experimenting on the details. Next, I am using my script brush to paint some fine lines. You can use the same round brush, but I'm afraid the lines could be thicker, and a script brush helps you to achieve a much more narrow and a thin line. So I have decided to soften the look of some of the fine details or marks that I created earlier by just giving it some light washes using this small tipped round brush that I've used earlier. So I just keep re-wetting the brush and giving it some light washes onto those patterns or marks that I have created. Some retouches onto the background petals as well. So I have made the same green shade mix to paint the leaves for the hydrangea, kickstarting onto the right hand side of the hydrangea head. So once again the negative painting technique takes place, as you notice as I paint the green shade, the background hydrangea seem to pop up because I am avoiding all those light colored areas of the pink shade in the background, allowing the lighter areas to pop up as other hydrangea heads spontaneously. I am just repainting with the same green to darken the shade of the leaf color, and I have also extended a little bit of the carmine paint onto the corners of the hydrangea leaf. So if you are familiar, usually the hydrangea leaves has a little hint of red in the corners of their leaves, but it may be subject to the type of hydrangea plant as well. But I decided to add this effect. Painting some veins onto the leaves using my script brush. Some final touch up onto the background, since I noticed it looked a bit faded. So basically we are quite done with this hydrangea painting, but if you'd like to add more highlights onto the petals, I would recommend using a white gouache. Just a little bit onto some part of the petals would do. You don't want to overdo it. And that white gouache paint adds some brightness onto this entire painting. And with this we are done with this tutorial. So do you like the outcome of this hydrangea painting? I also have similar painting videos of lilacs as well as wildflowers. You can check the video links in the description below. So if you liked my painting technique and guidance, then do hit the like and share button as well as subscribe to my channel. And I'll see you in another exciting tutorial. Bye.